Hello, everyone. Tonight we are squinting into a wind so sharp it could etch stories into bone. You're lying in a shallow snow hollow, the mammoth hide blanket over your body, frozen stiff in the corners. Your eyes sting. The wind is a wall screaming with powdered ice, and your own eyebrows aren't doing much, just a soggy nuisance at this point. But something stirs ahead, a shape, massive, moving steadily. And then you see them, not the tusks, not the size, but those overhanging snow-fringed eyebrows. Thick, wiry, wool-drenched awnings blinking slowly through the storm like ancient curtains in a frozen theater. Welcome to the Ice Age, friend. You probably won't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see who else is wandering the steppe tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You're walking across what once was called Beringia, though your people don't know that name yet. It's just the land between, wind-polished flat in all directions and crawling with giants. The ground is alive with whispering snow. You blink again and again just to keep your eyes clear. And then it hits you. Mammoths. These hulking things don't seem to have the same problem. They aren't squinting. They aren't turning away. They're looking forward. One of them shuffles closer, parting the wind like it owes her money. Her eyes are half-lidded beneath a roof of wiry, wind-snagged eyebrow fur that doesn't move, not even as sleet needles down in sheets. There's something architectural about the way the ridge sits over her face. It's not just hair, it's structure. Bone and brow working together, funneling meltwater away from the eye like a gutter. You blink again. Yours is frozen shut now. Historians still debate whether mammoth eyebrow density was an adaptive evolution or just coincidentally useful, but standing here, you're starting to feel like you know the answer. The elders back at camp joke about mammoths having the gaze of old gods. You thought it was poetry. But now, with snow spiraling in every direction, and your own vision reduced to watery slits, you realize those brows may be the single most underrated survival trait on the tundra. Odd fact. In modern elephants, tiny bristles around the eyes help filter dust. Some researchers think mammoths had a supercharged version of that, only colder, grittier, and fluffier. The mammoth you're watching blinks just once. That's all it takes to clear an inch of frost from the brow. You, meanwhile, are resorting to knuckle-wiping your own face like a soggy raccoon. You try standing straighter, mimicking her posture, squinting into the wind with all the drama you can muster. Your eyebrows do nothing. The wind hits your eyes like boiling vinegar. You think back to your cousin Ket, who once tied pine needles over her eyes with sinew string. Said it made her feel mammothy. It didn't. She got a rash, but even now hunched behind your shoulder-high walking stick, you wish you'd tried it. You wonder if the eyebrows grow in thicker with age. The calf you saw earlier had fuzz, but nothing like this matriarch. Maybe it's a rite of passage, your first molar, your first tail hair, your first forehead that could stop wind. You take a few more steps, squinting so hard your eyelids cramp. The mammoth watches you with mild disinterest. She doesn't need your approval. Her brows tell stories older than speech. You think you see steam curling off them, but it might just be your frostbitten brain making edits. You press your fingers to your own face. No protection, no bristles. Your eyebrows are good for telling someone you're annoyed, maybe for catching sweat if you're lucky, but hers are functional art. A soft fortress, a woolly awning. You fall in step behind her as the snow thickens into horizontal blades. Each time she shifts her head, her brows seem to catch the worst of it, sheltering her eyes like a visor. You realize then that you've been squinting your whole life and she has not. And that's when it clicks. Not just warmth, not just windbreak. Orientation. These brows, they help her see. In storms like this, every shadow is a predator, every drift a trap. But her vision remains clean, unimpaired. Because those brows, they redirect the world. You trip over a frozen bone sticking out of the snow horse or human, hard to tell. The mammoth steps around it like a priest avoiding a curse. Her gaze doesn't waver, still forward, still dry. You think about the future, far, far ahead, when people will dig up her skull, measure the overhanging ridges, guess at the muscle attachments. Some will call them supraorbital projections. Others will just say big brow, but they won't be here. They won't feel what you feel now, the way it cuts, the way your own sight stings. They won't know that the mammoth eyebrow wasn't just about the cold, it was about clarity, dignity, persistence. You're staring at survival incarnate, and she's staring back. The mammoth huffs snow steaming from her trunk. Her eyes narrow in calm focus beneath brows so thick they cast shadows even in whiteout. You nod once, respect. You trudge behind her for a while, but she doesn't wait for you. Why would she? You're small, twitchy, noisy in your breathing, and worst of all, you sweat. Mammoths do not sweat. That alone should tell you how far down the evolutionary ladder you still dangle. The wind slowed, but the air has that awful stillness you only get before another bad thing happens. Somewhere under your foot, permafrost groans, and then over the ridge, a shape. No, not one, several. You crouch low. Even your knees hate you. A cluster of mammoths gathered in the lee of a shale outcrop, their bodies forming a loose circle. In the middle, a calf, very young, not wobbling, but still not steady, covered in cinnamon-colored fuzz so thick it almost looks ridiculous. And there are those eyebrows again. Only this time the contrast is sharper. Ice clings to the calf's face like jagged ornaments. The fur around the eyes has frozen solid, forming little crystalline combs that sparkle whenever it blinks. You watch, waiting for some tragic outcome. Surely that calf will go blind, or cry out, or at least flinch. But no. He blinks again, perfectly fine. His eyes track a raven that passes overhead. His head tilts. You're more blinded than he is. Your own eyebrows feel like wilted ferns glued to a wet log. The wind has calmed, but now the air hurts in a different way. It's the weight of it, no motion, just cold like a held breath. And this tiny thing with frosty lashes is not only alive, it's curious. Odd fact. In some birds, feathers around the eyes help reduce snow glare. Theories about mammoth calves suggest their eyebrow fur may have had a similar light scattering effect, like a built-in snow filter for your retinas. You remember a woman from your tribe who used to brush her own eyebrows upward with pine tar during blizzards? She called it sky daggers. It made her look like an angry owl, but she insisted it worked. You scoffed then. You do not scoff now. The calf takes a slow step. Another. His foot plunges deep into a powder drift, but he's learning. He stumbles. A bit, eyes narrowed beneath those glittering brows, but there's no panic. The older mammoths watch without interfering. Trust, you realize, is part of survival. He'll find his footing, or he won't. Either way, no one's picking him up. You crawl forward on your elbows because standing upright feels like a declaration of stupidity. From this low vantage point, you can see how the wind had sculpted a hollow around the herd. Their heat keeps it from icing too fast. A natural cradle of warmth. A little pocket of breath in a world that's forgotten what warmth means. Historians still debate whether mammoth social structure prioritized young calves, or whether survival was strictly individual. Evidence of protective herding is mixed, but your frostbitten elbows are currently arguing for the calf comes first model. A movement to your left, a shift in tone, a low trumpet. One of the matriarchs raises her trunk and curls it gently around the calf's back. Not pushing, just touching, a half hug. He blinks again and a tiny wedge of snow falls from his brows like shed armor. And suddenly, you get it. Eyebrows are not just filters or insulation, they're armor. Scaled-down, frost-hardened barricades against the Ice Age's long, mean stare. Without them, that calf's eyes would already be little frozen stones. But here he is, blinking slow and deliberate, watching birds like he's got nothing better to do. You try to mimic his blink. It doesn't go well. Your eyelid sticks. When you open it again, it takes a layer of crust with it. You wince, muttering something you're glad the mammoths can't translate. There's a moment of stillness. The calf looks directly at you. His head tilts again. You're not sure if he sees a threat, a curiosity, or just a very ugly version of a seal. Either way, he doesn't bolt. That more than anything makes you feel briefly absurdly honored. The air shifts again. You smell the change before you hear it: ozone-wet bark iron. A thaw is coming, but not the good kind, slush and sleet. The kind of melt that ruins footing and blinds the world in gray. The matriarch lifts her trunk again. You think she's sniffing for it too. Then she moves, slow, precise, like a god dismounting a throne. The other adults follow, bunching closer to the calf. Their steps churn the snow into steam. The brows on the lead female are now heavy with frost, forming almost a mask, but her eyes still so clear. One last look back. You think it's at you, or maybe just the direction you're in. Either way, they leave. You don't follow. This part of the world was not meant for use, not without eyebrows like that. Oddly enough, in 1951, a Soviet team excavated a mammoth skull with such pronounced brow ridges they nicknamed it the Visor God. You wonder if they ever imagined how useful those ridges had really been. You finally blink again, and for a moment you swear your lashes freeze shut. You sit back on your heels, wipe your face with a sleeve, and stare across the melting drift where the calf had stood. No tracks, already erased by the wind's next tantrum. Only the memory remains: two blinking eyes beneath a bristle of frost-proof magic. You whisper to no one in particular, "Good luck, little one." You're losing track of time now. The light hasn't changed, but your knees are telling you it's been hours, or days, or a week made entirely of wind. Snow stings your face, then disappears. Then it returns again, sharper, like the sky is clearing its throat repeatedly just to make sure you're still listening. Somewhere up ahead, you hear it kirk-thump, a mammoth turning, not panicked, not startled, just shifting weight with the kind of gravity only something with a 4-ton thigh can manage. You climb over a rim of ice slab, barely keeping your footing, and there she is again, the matriarch. She stands half-turned into the wind, her face angled precisely not away from it, not directly into it, but through it. You squint to mimic her stance, and finally, you see it, the clever angle. The wind splits around her face like water around a rock. Her brows, thick as slugs and dusted in frost, guide the snowflakes up and over her eye sockets in a miniature weather system of their own. This isn't passive survival. This is strategy. Historians still debate whether mammoth facial posture was an evolved behavior or a learned adaptation. You now watching her work the blizzard like a conductor suspect it's both. With one deliberate movement, she tilts her head a few degrees further and takes a step forward, just one. But in doing so, she clears a path for the younger ones who follow in her wake. The snow rushes past her, missing her eyes entirely. The brow ridges act like aerodynamic fins, splitting the windstream and sending it sideways. You see now why she leads. It's not just age, it's architecture. A smaller mammoth behind her attempts to copy the motion. It's clumsy, but earnest. His head turns too sharply and the wind hits him square between the eyes. He jerks backward, annoyed. The matriarch doesn't look, but somehow you know she noticed. You creep closer, just a lump of furs and frost and regret. As you near, you notice something else. The eyebrows aren't symmetrical. Her right brow droops slightly lower, as if shaped by years of storms from a single direction. The hair here is darker, coarser, even a little clumped like wind-sculpted reeds along a stream. Odd fact. Human brows also shift asymmetrically with age. Some say we inherit that tendency from our Ice Age ancestors, those who watched the wind long enough to start growing with it. The mammoth inhales deeply, and you hear her breath whistle through frozen hairs on her upper lip. Then comes the head tilt again, slight, graceful, like nodding to an invisible god. Snow hits her head and flows over her brows away from her eyes. Her ears flapping slowly shake off sleet like wet tarps. You wonder if any other creature here could even attempt that. Saber-tooths have no such design. Deer blink blindly into the snow. Humans, well, let's not even get started on how we handle inclement weather. You once tried to make goggles from cracked tortoise shell. They froze to your face. She steps again, and this time the herd follows in a long arc behind her, turning with the storm rather than against it. There's rhythm here, an ancient synchronized choreography that depends not on instinct alone but on face control. Her brows tell the herd where to aim their heads. Her posture writes survival in real time. And then, as if on cue, the wind shifts. You barely notice at first, just a slight pause in the howling. But she does. She freezes trunk, raised sniffing. The wind picks up from a new direction, slicing across the plains at a 40-degree angle. Without hesitation, she pivots. Not much, just a few degrees. But it's everything. The eyebrows catch the new stream adjusting with her skull. The snow now skirts her face like a respectful servant. Behind her, the herd mimics the move, some better than others. A juvenile gets slapped full in the cheek by a gust and lets out a squeal. The matriarch ignores it. She has more wind to deal with. You crouch down, sheltering behind a chunk of ice, watching. There's a kind of genius in her movement, like watching a ship tack into the wind, except the sail is her face. Odd detail. Some scientists believe mammoth skulls had slightly deeper eye sockets than modern elephants, adding protection against both sun and snow glare. But the muscle attachments for eyebrow motion remain a mystery. Now you're thinking too much. You try the head tilt yourself just to test. Immediately, a gust blows snow into your nose, your right ear, and the corner of your mouth. You cough, choke gag, and nearly fall over. Yeah, no wonder they made it, and you probably won't. But there's humor here, too. You imagine early humans inventing brow tilt rituals, maybe dances based on wind angles or mock battles fought with exaggerated eyebrow flares. If it didn't happen, it should have. You see the matriarch's eyes shift slightly, scanning the edge of the ridge. She pauses. Is she reading the next wind line or remembering a path? There's no trail, no markers, but her body remembers every angle, every gust. Her eyebrows are more than windbreakers. They're a compass. The herd begins moving again slowly, curving across the slope, snow spraying sideways in fountains as their faces split the wind. The matriarch doesn't look back. She doesn't have to. You stay where you are, huddled in the lee of your ice chunk, feeling smaller than your own heartbeat. Behind you, the wind tries to argue. Ahead of you, a single pair of eyebrows redraws the map. You're starting to believe the mammoth eyebrow wasn't just a thing, it was a philosophy. Because here's the weird part: as you trail behind the herd, skirting their great craters of hoofprints in the snow, the sun breaks through. Not a full break. Just one of those weird ice age moments when clouds forget themselves and part just enough to spill a blinding flood of pale gold. It reflects off the ground so violently that even your shadow winces. You've never felt more attacked by light. And yet once again the mammoths are fine. They don't flinch, don't turn away. Their pupils stay steady and forward-facing. That eyebrow ridge, thick with muscle and shaggy fur, extends so far that it casts a full shadow over the eyes, like some prehistoric baseball cap designed by evolution and wool. You look up at the lead female, yes, her again, because there's no unseeing her now. Her brows are haloed in sunlight. Little steam wisps lift off them, curling like smoke off a bonfire. And beneath that, her eyes are relaxed. You know that look. It's the same face elders back home wear while holding a warm rock near their cheek. Historians still debate whether mammoth brow projections helped with solar glare or were incidental byproducts of skull design. But you're watching the real-time result, a creature that doesn't need to squint. Ever. You reach up and try to shade your eyes with one stiff hand. Immediate regret. You forgot your glove on the ridge back there. Your hand sizzles against the frozen air like someone licking iron. You jerk it back under your furs and mutter a curse that translates roughly to, "May your hut collapse under lukewarm soup." The wind doesn't seem to care. Odd fact: the sun at high latitudes during the Ice Age could reflect off snow and ice for hours without lowering in the sky. Snow blindness was a constant risk for humans. Mammoths never documented. The matriarch tilts her head ever so slightly, not from the wind this time, but for balance. You see her shadow shift across a nearby slope. It looks like a moving cliff, and her brows, those woolen ledges, throw shade just where it's needed. One juvenile mimics the motion. You chuckle. Poor thing overdoes it and nearly topples sideways into a drift. Behind you, something honks. A snow goose, probably lost. You want to tell it not to bother. The mammoths own this light. You notice something else now when the mammoths lower their heads to graze. Yes, even now they dig beneath the snow for buried sedge and lichen. They angle their heads just so. Enough for their brows to shield their eyes from the sun's scatter off the snow crust. Even eating is a calculation. Those eyebrows aren't passive, they're active instruments. One of the male's slightly younger, broader face, awkward energy shovels snow with his trunk. You catch him wincing slightly at a sunbeam. His brows haven't filled out yet. Just a suggestion of what's to come. You know the feeling. Puberty hits different when your ancestors were giants. You start to sweat. The sun's reflection on the snow is unbearable. The air is still freezing, but that kind of paradox is what Ice Age life is all about. You roast and freeze at the same time. You dig into your satchel, pull out a strip of hide, and squint. Then you tie it tight around your forehead. A primitive visor. It smells like fish, but desperate times. One of the smaller mammoths glances your way. You raise an eyebrow, not like hers obviously, but enough to suggest, "Yeah, I'm working on it." A gust of wind kicks up another wave of powder. The matriarch doesn't even blink. Her brows split the flurry like a boat prow. You, on the other hand, snort snow and nearly sneeze your spine loose. You remember something from a dream, or maybe it was a story. The mammoth was once a star creature sent down from the sky to walk without fear of wind or light. And the eyebrows, stolen clouds woven into her face by the sky god's jealous sister. Something like that. Your grandmother never repeated it twice the same way. There's a kind of beauty in it, though, imagining these creatures not just surviving but dignified. While you shuffle around wrapped in 10 layers of stolen fur, they move with the confidence of an empire. An empire of brows. You follow their path along a frozen stream bed. They move in a slight arc to avoid the glare reflecting off the water's glassy surface. Another calculated motion. Another reason you're falling behind. You feel the glare burning into your retinas. They don't. You stop to blink your 1,000th blink of the day, and it takes a full 5 seconds for the burn behind your eyes to dim. You wipe your face, already crusted again. The hide strip across your forehead slips down and covers one eye. You decide to leave it. Half blind might be better than snow blind. One last glance at the matriarch. She's walking through a column of light that would blind a lesser creature. Her brows cut through it like sails, and her eyes sharp, warm, undistracted. The story of your clan's eyebrow experiment is still the funniest thing anyone's willing to admit happened last migration. It started with someone, probably Ket, because it's always Ket declaring with absolutely no evidence that mammoth eyebrows could be copied using crow feathers and sap. You were there, you watched it happen. You warned them, of course. But warnings don't hold much weight when you're freezing and desperate and bored enough to invent fashion trends with prehistoric birds. The idea was simple. Pluck a dozen feathers from the wings of a particularly offended crow, dip them in pine sap for stiffness, and affix them just above the eyes using a paste made of crushed bone and spit. Voila, mammoth mimicry. You remember Ket's first reveal? Her brow line looked like 2 sad brooms glued to her face. Everyone clapped. You tried not to laugh, but the sound you made was basically a cough being bullied. Odd fact. Some modern birds use facial feather arrays to communicate aggression or alertness. Your clan's fake brows just communicated help. To their credit, a few people joined in. Soon there was a whole group walking around camp with twitchy feather brows squinting dramatically into the snow. One elder declared he could hear the wind better through them. Another said hers made her dreams more vivid. You suspect she was just inhaling too much sap. Historians still debate whether early humans ever actually imitated mammoth features for survival. But if your clan's attempt is anything to go by, the answer is probably yes, followed by no, followed by everyone agreeing to never talk about it again. Of course, it didn't help that the next morning half the feather brows had frozen stiff and snapped off like dry twigs. One unlucky soul sneezed and set his entire fake brow on fire from a nearby ember. You watched it smolder and twirl into the sky like a confused moth. And yet, there was something there, a quiet understanding. Even if the imitation was ridiculous, the impulse made sense. You wanted what the mammoths had: brow authority, weatherproof dignity, a little built-in roof for the soul. The matriarch you've been watching all day passes nearby again. She doesn't give you even half a glance, which somehow feels worse than being trampled. Her brows sway gently as she turns, carrying clumps of ice-melted snow and probably bits of old dreams in their woven bulk. You get the sense that if you tried to explain the feather experiment to her, she'd just blink slowly and walk on. You take shelter under a leaning stone slab, trying to warm your face. Your own brows are useless again, wet, crooked, still sore from when Ket trimmed them for aerodynamics. You regret every choice that led to this moment. A pair of younger clan members walks by. One has leftover sap in their hair, and the other is chewing on the remains of a failed feather. Neither looks particularly proud. "We're retiring the look," one mutters. "Mammoths already own the patent," the other adds. You nod solemnly. You lost a lot of dignity this week, but you gained something else: clarity. There's a joke going around camp now. What's the difference between a mammoth's eyebrow and yours? Answer. One makes you squint. The other makes the wind squint back. You overheard someone carving that into a rock. A future archaeologist's nightmare, probably. Still, it wasn't a total waste. In the right light, when the wind dies down just enough, you swear you can still see people glancing toward the mammoths, studying them. Not just for survival tips, for inspiration, for posture. The truth is, the mammoth's eyebrow does what yours never will. It doesn't just protect, it commands. It declares without sound, "I have seen storms worse than you." You wonder if early cave artists tried to draw them. Not just the Tuscan sighs and stomping feet, but those silent brows. Lines across a face that meant endurance. Maybe a few charcoal sketches are still out there, buried beneath time and snow. You shift under your stone slab and blink into the half-light. Your eyes ache. The wind is rising again. It's always rising. But you feel different now. The sap's worn off. The feathers are long gone. But something settled in you, something more solid than imitation. You reach up, touch your brow line, and whisper, "Grow, you useless things. Grow like you mean it." The wind howls in response as if amused. You wake to find a snowdrift has partially swallowed your legs. Not a metaphor. Literal snow up to your thighs, packed around your boots like cold bread dough. You wiggle your toes barely. Everything's stiff except your thoughts, which have apparently decided to return in full, unwanted detail. The mammoths are already a speck on the white horizon, trudging eastward like a woolly procession of mountains. But before you can regret falling asleep, you notice something: a trail. Not just prints. Hair. Tiny threads of brown wool scattered along the path. And more importantly, one long strand of eyebrow hair caught on a shrub. You pick it up. It's coarse, wiry, slightly curved, like a twisted fishing line made of bark. You hold it up to the sun, and it gleams faintly, refracting light in odd directions. You run your finger along its length. It's warm. Well, not exactly warm, but less cold than everything else. That counts. You sit down, legs still frozen into your snowy leg mold, and study it closer. The hair has a bend in it like it grew with a purpose. You've felt this before, like whiskers on a lynx or the antennae of a beetle. Not passive, not decoration, sensors. Historians still debate whether mammoth eyebrows served only for weather protection or also for environmental detection, like miniature wind vanes, reading currents and micro fluctuations of pressure. You lift the strand to your cheek just under your eye. It brushes your skin with the kind of eerie precision that makes you shiver. And not from the cold. You feel a draft shift even before your ear registers it. A new breeze to the west, and the mammoths already turning toward it. Odd fact. Elephant facial skin is rich with nerve endings. Their relatives, the mammoths, likely had similar sensitivity, possibly enhanced in eyebrow zones by the thickness of follicle clusters. You start tugging your legs out of the drift, heart beating faster than it should. You suddenly want more of those hairs. Want to test them, map them, wrap them around sticks, tie them to shelters. Imagine a hut that tells you which way the wind is thinking. You remember your great-uncle once said, "Everything the mammoth does is a sentence, you just have to listen for the verbs." You didn't understand it then. Still don't, really. But this single hair feels like a punctuation mark. As you finally free your legs and stand up, your knees crack like sapwood. You hobble forward following the thread trail the herd left behind. No longer walking blindly, now you're testing the air, watching how small pieces of fur move when the wind curves around stones, cliffs, your own body. And suddenly, you realize it's not just the shape of the eyebrow, it's the hair itself, the thickness, the tension, the communication, like a language your skin isn't fluent in yet. You remember another moment ages ago watching your clan's best tracker touch tree bark and announce without doubt a bear passed here yesterday, but he's limping. When asked how he knew, he said the bark was listening. Maybe mammoth brows are the same. Maybe they listen better than we do. You keep walking. The snow begins to soften under your boots. That's bad. Soft snow means melt. Melt means lush. Lush means traps. But you notice how your lone brow hair thread catches each gust and tremble, flicking left just slightly before the temperature dips. You tie it to the end of your spear, hold it upright. It quivers, points, then stills, then flicks again. It's a tiny, silent guide. And now you understand why the matriarch blinked so rarely, because her brows already knew what was coming. You try blinking slower yourself, exaggerating each lid movement, timing it with the thread's twitch. Feels silly. Looks silly. But there's a rhythm forming. Something ancient, something beyond blinking. Back home, someone once said you blink to forget the last moment before facing the next. Mammoths. Maybe they blink to acknowledge it. You press on. The thread dances. And though the wind rises once more and snow returns in full tantrum, you no longer feel aimless. You're not following footprints. You're following meaning. Brow-born meaning written in hairs and hidden currents. The herd is a shape ahead again. You're catching up. Or at least not falling further behind. You think of Ket. She would tie 10 of these to her face and claim to hear whale songs in the frost. You miss her annoying confidence. You miss the humor. You vow to bring this single hair back to camp, maybe string it across a doorframe. See what dreams it catches. The wind whips harder, now angrier that you're learning its tricks. You smile and blink once slow mammoth style. It's the first time in days your eyes don't sting. You finally reach the edge of their circle, yes. They've formed one again. And the first thing you notice is the silence. Not just the absence of speech, a silence with weight. You've walked through snow before, but this is different. Every crunch beneath your boots feels like a disruption. The mammoths aren't resting. They're reading. Their heads are low trunks curled like frozen question marks, and every one of them faces outward, a ring of attention. At the center is the calf, again smaller now, not because he's changed, but because the world around him has grown larger, colder, hungrier. And they're just to the side, the matriarch. Of course. Standing sentinel, her head angled just slightly the way a good roof angles to drain water. Her brows drip no weep with melt. You can hear it in the quiet, a rhythm of soft tapping, like a lullaby written in droplets. One tap every few seconds as the ice melts and falls from her brows steady and unbothered. The other seemed to take comfort in the sound, a kind of storm metronome. You crouch low behind a boulder, nose red and mind alert. The wind has shifted again. This one smells of wet fur and rock. There's a predator somewhere not close but thinking about being close. The matriarch lifts her head a notch. Her brows shift just enough to cast a shadow over her eye. Her gaze locks on the western ridge. You don't see anything at first. Then a flicker gray movement. A dire wolf, maybe two scouting. They don't charge. They know better. But they're testing the edges. Watching how the herd breathes. Historians still debate whether mammoth leaders operated on instinct or observation. But watching her now, you realize she sees everything. And she feels more than that. Odd fact. The skin around a mammoth's eyes was likely highly vascularized, allowing it to stay warm even when the brows were heavy with melt. Some researchers think this helped prevent temporary blindness from frostbite or glare. The matriarch exhales slow and deep. Steam billows forward like a signal. The herd doesn't flinch, but their posture adjusts. Subtle. An inch here, a hip turn there, but the ring closes tighter. Her brows catch more melt. Her lashes blink once, slow, deliberate, unhurried. She's not just watching for danger. She's filtering the world through those brows, catching snow, reading wind, tracking scent. You begin to think of them less as hair and more as antennae made of patience. You shift slightly, and a clump of snow drops from your sleeve. The sound is louder than you'd hoped. Her head snaps your way. You freeze. Her brows, now shaggy with moisture, lift ever so slightly. Her eyes, framed by the most glorious ice-woven helmet evolution ever designed, lock on yours. And you feel judged, not threatened, just appraised. She holds your gaze for a full 3 seconds. It feels like standing in front of a cave while the earth decides whether to collapse. Then slowly, she blinks. The snow on her right brow slips off in a single perfect curve. You don't breathe until it hits the ground. Then she turns her head slightly again, resuming her watch, but now you feel included. Not in the herd, but not fully apart. You glance around. The calf yawns just once. His own brows, still stubby but forming structure, are dusted with fine frost. They twitch slightly. You wonder if they're growing fast enough. A gust hits from the northeast. The matriarch moves before anyone else does. She shifts her head again, that perfect tilt, her brows catching the full brunt of the new wind stream. She doesn't blink. She guides. A century, not just of body, but of temperature, angle, and wind memory. You realize now how important this position is. Not ceremonial, not symbolic, functional. Like the prow of a ship, she takes the force and tells the rest which way to lean. You inch back behind the rock, quietly now, respectfully. You don't want to be the noise that breaks the pattern. A snowflake lands on your eyelash. You blink. It melts instantly. You sigh. They blink to clear the cold. You blink to escape it. You stay there until the wolves give up and vanish into the dusk, until the wind shifts again, until the last of the melt slides off her eyebrows and the ring opens once more. And for a few minutes longer, you don't even feel the cold. You're back with the elders now. Not because you gave up, but because your feet started doing that thing where they stopped reporting in. Like two tired scouts deciding, you know what, this war is no longer our concern. They sit by a hollow log stacked with fire bits and ancient gossip. 3 old voices snapping louder than the flames. At the center is Gulm, half blind, fully certain. On his left is Mora, who still wears mammoth-hide boots with the fur facing inward, a scandal. And then there's Tem, who may or may not be a liar depending on the moon. And what are they arguing about? Eyebrows. You arrive mid-debate, hands thawing near the fire. ears tuning in as Gollum pounds his walking stick into the snow and declares, "They were for courtship." Mora rolls her eyes so hard they practically steam. They were for weather, just weather. You think anyone was flirting in 40 wind? Tem leans in voice buttery. No, no, you're both wrong. They were status signals. The longer the brow, the older the mammoth. It was like tusks, but furrier. You say nothing. Not yet. This is sacred ground, the kind of argument that's been simmering for years, maybe centuries, maybe since the first person stared into a mammoth's eyes and asked, "What are you wearing?" Historians still debate whether mammoth eyebrows had a secondary social function like human facial hair or peacock tails, or whether the effect was purely practical. Evidence is circumstantial. But elders. They have opinions. Golm huffs. I saw one once, brow so long it draped over her eye. The bull next to her couldn't stop shifting his weight, like he was dancing in place. Mora retorts, or maybe he had gas. They eat bark golm. Odd fact. In some modern animals, like the mandrill, facial fur color or texture can influence social hierarchy. No one's proven this for mammoths, but oh, does it sound believable? You sip melted snow from a bone cup nodding. Maybe it was both you suggest, protection and attraction, like the brow that can block a storm might also win you a mate. They all pause. Even the fire crackles politely. Then Tem cackles. Imagine wooing someone with your forehead. "Hey, baby, look how frostproof my soul awnings are." Golm grins toothlessly. Better than what you tried last season. Laughter breaks the cold for a moment. You're glad for it. The storm outside still rages, muffled now by the hide walls of your shelter. But mammoths are on everyone's mind. You pull something from your pouch. The brow hair. Still stiff, still faintly curved like it wants to point somewhere. You pass it around. Mora holds it to her own brow and frowns. Do you think they fell through these like when wind shifts or predators breathe too close? Maybe you say. I followed the matriarch. Her head moved like a compass. Tem snorts. You followed a mammoth. You nod. She didn't trample you. She blinked at me. Silence. Then Golm whispers, reverent, and what did the blink mean? You think for a moment that I was neither threat nor kin. Just something with worse eyebrows. They like that. Even Mora smirks. Later, you carve a little face into a bark shard, just eyes, and a thick line for the brow. You hang it above the fire. For good luck, for memory, or maybe just because it looks right. Before sleep, the debate resumes again, flirting versus status versus weatherproofing. It always will, and that you think is the real point. Mammoth eyebrows weren't just fur, they were a mystery. One that made people talk, wonder, remember. Migration day begins with blood-colored light. The kind that makes snow look like crushed bones soaked in fire. Your clan is already up packing, binding, grumbling. No one likes moving in this weather, but no one survives by staying put either. As you shoulder your kit and chew on frozen root bark, you catch sight of something strange across the clearing. A group of young hunters, barely old enough to keep a fire going, are crouched in a circle painting their faces. You wander closer, not with authority, just curiosity dressed in layers of mammoth hide. They're using soot mixed with bear fat, smearing wide black lines across their brows. Not above, over. Like a unibrow, but angrier and thicker, so thick it could catch a storm. You clear your throat. What's this then? One of them, Nan, grins like someone who just invented thunder. Tusk dancer writes, he says, as if you're supposed to know what that means. Another chimes in, eyes bright. You paint the brow, then walk where the herd walked. If it doesn't melt, the mammoth saw you. You blink. If what doesn't melt, the paint, the brow. If it stays through one sun arc, it means your path is chosen. Right. Logic clearly not invited to this ceremony. Odd fact. Many human cultures use facial markings as rites of passage. Scarification, tattooing, and ceremonial paint often mimic natural forms like animal features. These imitations may reflect admiration, spiritual connection, or just old-fashioned superstition. One kid starts adding extra ridges with charcoal carving furrowed lines down the bridge of his nose. Another adds tiny dots above his painted brow's ice beads, he claims. You have to admit it's creative. And a little unnerving. They look like miniature thunder gods. Historians still debate whether such eyebrow rituals existed in Paleolithic societies. No hard evidence survives, only markings on cave walls that might represent facial art or could just be poorly drawn reindeer. But here and now, it's real enough. You're about to ask who started it when Nan produces a strip of mammoth hide from a pouch. Real. Brow fur intact, curved like a scythe, found it snagged on a tree, he says, reverent. From her, I think, the big one. You don't question it. The matriarch lives in the myth space, now half fact, half fog. This just adds another chapter. They pass it around like a relic. Each one presses it to their forehead for a beat. Not long. Not dramatic. Just contact. You're tempted to ask if they feel anything, but it's clear they do. They just won't explain it in words you'd understand. Then the leader. Somehow, it's... Nan again climbs a rock, plants his feet wide, and bellows into the snow. Heavy sky eyebrows that speak, tell the wind our names. You cough loudly into your sleeve to stifle a laugh. They don't notice. Or maybe they do and don't care. You remember how Ket used to paint streaks under her eyes before long hunts, not for vision, she claimed, but so the sun doesn't forget me. And maybe this is the same. Not science. Statement. They set out before the rest of the camp. Painted proud, shouting jokes you can't quite hear. You watch them disappear into the red light, like walking glyphs. Later that day, someone asks where the tusk dancers went. You just shrug, following the herd. Another elder mutters, they'll freeze. You look toward the horizon. Maybe, but they'll mean it when they do. That night back at your own fire, you mix soot and ash with lard and smear 2 quick strokes over your brow, just for the feeling, just for the connection. The warmth surprises you. Or maybe it's just the memory of that look. The matriarchs blink, the calf's snow-dusted furrow, the melted brow dripping like wisdom from a roof made of wool. You fall asleep under stars that blink back. You've seen many things frozen in the old fields. Fish curled like question marks inside solid lakes. Birds mid-flap caught in sudden cold, so fast they forgot to land. But you've never seen expression freeze until now. The mammoth lies half buried in snow but not hidden. Her flank rises from the tundra like a thawing hill. The ice that covers her face is translucent crystalline. You can see everything. The fur lines, the curve of her trunk, the way her brows furrow over empty sockets like she's still squinting into wind. You weren't looking for her. No one ever finds mammoth corpses on purpose. They rise when they're ready, when meltwater pulls back the blanket of centuries and offers the world a glimpse. You step closer, cautiously, reverently. This one's massive. Not the matriarch, but perhaps one of her ancestors or an echo of her future. You feel small. Again, the brow is what you notice first. The muscles have long since collapsed, but the structure remains thick, pronounced ice-slicked. It's almost theatrical, like a mask worn by a queen buried too suddenly. Odd fact. When mammoths died in permafrost conditions, soft tissue could sometimes survive for millennia. Researchers have recovered intact eyelashes, lips, even stomach contents. But eyebrows. Those often go unnoticed, too humble, too slow to advertise themselves. You kneel beside her. The snow has carved ripples around her skull. Meltwater drips slowly from her upper brow ridge just above the eye. The skin there is pale but still textured. A kind of silent story carved into leather. She looks worried, or maybe focused, or maybe nothing. Expression, after all, is just posture frozen in time. Historians still debate whether mammoths had expressive facial control the way modern elephants do, subtle shifts of the brow, trunk, and ears. Watching this face now, you begin to believe they must have. How else to explain this look? You brush ice gently from the furrow. The brow doesn't move, of course, but the illusion deepens. Her eyes are shut, sealed by time, but her face says almost open, like she went to sleep watching something important. You lean closer, not out of disrespect, out of curiosity. You want to know what she saw last. It could have been wolves, or falling snow, or a herd turning away, or just the sky. You find yourself whispering, "Did it hurt?" You don't expect an answer, but the wind hushes as if listening. Your breath fogs on the surface of her fur. A few strands still cling to the brow. They're shorter than you expected, wavy, and frozen in a curl like they were reacting to the storm even in her final moment. A thought hits you, maybe. Mammoth brows didn't just block wind. Maybe they warned others. Maybe the direction of the fur, the stiffness of the curl, the way it collected snow, all subtle signals. Not for humans, for other mammoths. You step back stunned by the idea. Communication through weather, through fur posture. What a strange, elegant system. You walk a slow circle around her, reading the shape of her frozen form like the world's slowest paragraph. Her tail's missing, probably taken long ago. Her tusks curve skyward, one cracked, but the brows remain. That furrow, that silent arch, unyielding, it reminds you of an elder in your clan who once fell asleep while sitting up. He'd been dreaming with his brow so tightly knit that even in sleep he looked like he was still solving a riddle. You think of the calf, the matriarch, the herd you'll probably never see again. And here this ancient face buried in snow watching nothing now but silence. You take one last look before you leave. Not just at the mammoth, but at her face. The brow still holds, its line still curves downward as if to keep seeing, even in death. You don't say goodbye. It doesn't feel necessary. Instead, you mimic her posture. Just a tilt of the head, a gentle furrow of your own brow, a nod to memory. The snow begins to fall again. Soft this time. The kind of snow that doesn't sting. The kind that waits. You wouldn't believe it if you hadn't seen it. A young mammoth, maybe 4 seasons old, standing perfectly still in a patch of steaming ground wearing the world's most confused expression. Not in pain, not in panic, just uncertain. Then you notice what's wrong. Its eyebrows are gone. Not trimmed, not frostbitten. Gone. You're not alone. 2 other trackers from the coastlands are with you, having stumbled across the scene during a detour meant to find pine grubs. One of them starts laughing. The other just says, "That calf looks like it regrets every decision." You inch forward for a better look. The calf's face is wet, too wet. Its eyes, unshielded, blink rapidly as water drips into them from a fringe of bald skin above. And they're pooled at the edge of a bubbling hot spring. Is the answer a tuft of eyebrow fur floating like a lost scarf? Now, no one's entirely sure what the calf was doing. Maybe it tripped, maybe it tried to drink. Maybe, as one of your companions suggested, it was just being spicy. But the result is clear: one accidental dunk and the eyebrow ridge boiled clean. Odd fact. Some animals shed patches of fur when exposed to sudden heat shock. Mammoth fur, with its dense oils and layered structure, may have clumped and sloughed under just the right wrong conditions. You watch as the calf blinks again and again, clearly disoriented. The herd is still nearby, but keeping distance. Not abandoning him, just waiting. Mammoths aren't cruel, but they are practical. And now comes the part you weren't expecting. The wind picks up. Nothing major, just a testy breeze through the canyon. You see it hit the calf's face and he stumbles. Not from force, from vision. The wind pushes snow straight into his unshielded eyes. He snorts, rears back slightly, shakes his head violently. But it's no good. Without the brow fur to redirect the flakes, the storm meets his gaze directly. He tries to turn his head. Wrong direction. More snow. Panic flutters in his shoulders. Not fear, confusion. Historians still debate whether mammoth brows were critical for young survival, or if they grew in thicker later as a response to repeated storm exposure. But this calf? This one is a living, blinking argument that those brows weren't optional. You step forward gently, unsure what you can do. His eyes are red now. Water clings to his lashes. He tries using his trunk to block the wind, curling it up like a visor. It kind of works, but it's clumsy, slow, and exhausting. Your companion offers unhelpfully, maybe he'll grow better ones. Like when you shave your beard and it grows back angry. You ignore him and kneel to the edge of the spring, retrieving the drifting eyebrow tuft. It's still warm, saturated, and sad. You hold it in your hands like something sacred and ridiculous. The calf watches you, eyes squinted, trunk drooping. He looks embarrassed. You didn't know mammoths could look embarrassed. You inch closer and hold out the soggy tuft. He sniffs it, snorts, and then, without ceremony, tries to eat it. You yank it back just in time. Well, so much for sacredness. You tear a strip of hide from your coat and wrap the fur into it, forming a rough band. You hesitate, then step close, too close. The calf flinches but doesn't retreat. You press the makeshift brow gently to his head. He blinks. The fur drapes just enough to form a shadow over his eyes. Not perfect, but better. Another gust comes. He doesn't stumble. He blinks slowly, adjusts his stance, breathes. You step back. Your companions, who had been cracking jokes a minute ago, now stand silent. Even they can feel something shift. The matriarch arrives not long after, silent and wide. She gives the calf one look, then steps closer. Her trunk brushes the hide strap. She doesn't remove it, just nods, barely. Then she turns and walks away. The calf follows. Odd fact. In modern elephants, matriarchs exhibit complex social memory, including remembering calves by scent gait, and even preferred scratching trees. You wonder if the matriarch will now always remember this one as the one who lost his eyebrows. You return to your trail empty-handed and a little dazed. Not because you fixed something, but because for one moment you understood something. What those eyebrows meant when they were gone. The fog at the glacier's edge moves like breath. Thick, slow curling down from the blue wall of ice in undulating waves, as if the ancient world is exhaling one last long sigh. You stand knee-deep in frost-like and watching it curl around your legs like it's deciding whether or not you belong here. And then, through the fog mammoths, faint shapes at first. Towering shadows that move like ships through a white sea. You see the rise of a back, the tilt of tusks, then a glint of eye. But most of all, you see the brows. They move forward out of the haze with a quiet confidence that makes you take a step back. Not from fear, just reverence. The fog parts slightly, just enough for you to make out the matriarch again. Yes, her. Her eyebrows are soaked but intact, thick as ever and glistening. The fog clings to them like they're magnets. You realize she's not just passing through the mist, she's wearing it, shaping it. Odd fact. Dense eyebrow ridges in mammoths may have helped them retain body heat near sensitive sensory organs like the eyes and forehead, especially in moisture-heavy environments like fog banks or near meltwater channels. You crouch low and watch as she stops at the very edge of the glacier. Her brows catch the low light just so, forming dark arches above her eyes. Arches that frame the landscape beyond like the vault of a temple. You're not even exaggerating. That's exactly what it feels like she's looking through a sacred gate carved out of her own skull. Behind her, the herd slows too. The fog coils around their legs, swirls between their ribs. The calf from before now, with a regrown suggestion of brow fuzz, blinks slowly and stands at her flank. The matriarch tilts her head slowly, deliberately. Her brow shadows shift. She's not looking at the glacier. She's reading it. You follow her gaze. There are fissures running down the face of the ice, new ones. Pale blue veins like stories trapped beneath the surface. Water drips from the corners, but subtly too subtle for your eyes, but not for hers. You swear her brows twitch almost like antennae in a crosswind. The herd behind her murmurs, trunks shuffle, hooves slide. They feel it too. She lowers her head slightly, and the entire herd responds with a single breath, deep, unified, trusting. The fog thickens for a moment, swallows the sound. Historians still debate whether mammoths had the capacity to sense glacial shift by sound, sight, or vibration. But some theorize that sensory hairs in the face, particularly near the brow ridge, could detect changes in air pressure or microtremors. Looking at her now, that doesn't seem like a theory. It feels like a fact. You step forward quietly, placing a foot on a wet stone that hisses slightly under your weight. One of the younger males turns his head. His brow is less defined, the fur lighter, but it still forms a distinct arc. You notice how his eyes are slightly more open than the rest, more exposed. His attention shifts frequently. You wonder if he's still learning to trust the brow, still interpreting the signals. The matriarch doesn't flinch. She stands like a monument in the mist, her gaze trained not on the surface of the glacier but on something behind it, something beyond. You try to imagine the world through her eyes, a map made of shadow and motion, temperature and trickles. Brows not just as shields, but as guides. As interpreters, another gust of fog passes, and for a moment she vanishes completely. You panic ridiculously. Take 2 steps forward like you might be able to do something, and then she reappears framed again precisely where she stood before. She hasn't moved. The fog has. You laugh quietly at yourself. She's not lost. She never is. You look again at the ridge, the ice, the cracks, and then it happens. A section of the glacier lets go with a distant thrum, more vibration than sound. A piece falls, not large, but enough to make the ground shudder. The matriarch lifts her brow, just slightly, and turns. Not panicked, not surprised, just informed. The herd follows. You don't. You stay there staring at the path she's leaving behind, watching how the fog moves around her wake. You wonder how many creatures in this world navigate like that. Through information you can't see. Through signals you don't even know exist. You reach up and touch your own brow, damp, bare, unhelpful, and yet hopeful. That night you sleep beside the bones. Not just any bones, her bones. The matriarch, yes, or perhaps one like her, you can't be sure. The mammoth you saw in your dreams is the same shape now, silent and stretched across the valley floor like a collapsed star. Her tusks are still rooted deep in the ground, like she tried anchoring herself to the earth before the storm could claim her. But it's the face that holds you. Even in death, the brow holds firm. A graceful arch of ancient bones still curved in that same determined shape. There's no fur now. That has long since been taken by time wind scavengers, but the ridge remains. That heavy sloping brow, silent, watching, unblinking. You build a fire nearby, more for comfort than warmth, and lie beneath a hide. The flames flicker, casting orange waves along her skull, and then slowly, your mind begins to drift. You dream. You dream of mammoths that don't walk but float. Not through air but through memory. Their footsteps echo like whale songs through cold stone. They blink slowly in a realm without time. Their eyebrows shimmer not with hair, but with frost that never melts. One of them, her leans close to you. Her face is impossibly large. You can't even see her eyes, just the brow. Curved, majestic, alive. And in the dream it moves, like a wave, like a curtain being pulled back to reveal a stage of light. The brow lifts, and suddenly you understand they see not with their eyes, but through the brow. It frames the world, shapes it. The mammoth's vision isn't a line, it's a theater, a sanctuary. Odd fact. Some neurobiologists speculate that facial structure can influence directional focus and attention spans, even in non-human species. If that sounds ridiculous, you haven't seen a mammoth blink in a blizzard. You wake up slowly to the crackle of coals and the sound of wind passing across ribs. Yes, you're still lying beside the skeleton, but something has changed. You don't feel alone. The sky is a blanket of gray velvet. The snow has paused, not stopped, just held its breath. You sit up. The fire has gone low, but it glows enough to cast dancing shadows across the skull. You look at the brow again, and now it feels like it's looking back. You say nothing. There's no need. Whatever language the mammoths spoke, they spoke it with their heads, tilts, angles, pauses, and always the brow. You sit quietly for a long time listening, not to sound, to shape, to pressure, to the movement of cold through stone. A voice echoes in your mind, not words but memory. You saw me once. Now you carry me always. And you do. The matriarch is gone. But her brow has been carved into your thoughts. Every time you look into wind, into fog, into glare, you see her. Even when you close your eyes. Especially then. You've walked for 3 days with hardly a word spoken. Not out of solemnity, your throat just can't handle more ice air. Your lips are cracked. Your breath feels like it's wrapped in needles, and your eyebrows, still sadly human, are now a crusted mess of frost and regret. But up ahead, a figure stands at a bend in the valley trail. A future person. No, really. You blink twice to be sure, but he's there. The clothes are strange, tight-stitched in straight lines, no fur. The boots are thin. His nose is red. His breath fogs out in delicate clouds, and his gloves, they look like they were made by someone who has never met weather before. This is your first archaeologist. He doesn't see you. His eyes are locked on a mammoth skull half buried in the gravel wash. The brows are intact miraculously. You can see the fur still frozen in tight curls along the ridge. Steam rises from the bones like it's breathing. He circles it, notebook in hand, speaking into a box. You hear, preserved orbital ridges intact. Remarkable skeletal structure, but minimal hair remains on the frontal lobe. He squints. Then says the part that nearly makes you drop your stick. Possibly no eyebrow hair, likely a balding species. You choke. Not because it's funny, because it's horrifying. Odd fact. In the 19th century, some fossil reconstructions mistakenly shaved fur from mammoths to make them look more dignified. One even showed a mammoth without tusks, just a large hairy pig with a confused expression. You want to scream, or throw snowballs, or hand him a fistful of mammoth brow fluff and yell, "Try squinting through a blizzard, genius." But you can't. You're not really here. Not in his version of now. He circles again, murmuring about bone structure and streamlined skull curvature. At one point, he even wonders aloud if the eyebrow was vestigial. You sit down hard on a snowbank. This is how it ends. After generations of wise tilts and storm-deflecting furrows, the mighty mammoth is reduced to maybe bald. A tragic misinterpretation. Historians still debate whether mammoth representations in modern science have overemphasized tusks and underemphasized facial features like brows, ears, and lips. That debate apparently is still losing. You watch the man pluck a loose fur strand from the snow near the skull. He doesn't examine it. He brushes it away, as if it doesn't matter. A brow hair, a survivor, a clue, and he lets it go. You nearly stand, but you don't. You're not supposed to be in this moment. This is his time, his misunderstanding. So you watch him pack up his gear and walk away satisfied with the idea of a sleek-headed mammoth like a giant sad mole in a coat. You shake your head. He never saw her, you whisper. Not the matriarch, not the calf, not the melt, not the tilt. He saw bones, but not the gesture. The snow picks up again. You walk down to the skull and kneel by it. Gently, you press your fingers to the edge of the brow ridge, cold, smooth, ancient. But the curve remains, still angled against the storm, still shielding, still right. You close your eyes and tilt your own head ever so slightly, just enough that the breeze changes direction across your cheek. You feel the echo, not memory, muscle. The mammoth didn't vanish. It blinked and waited. The snow thickens again as you follow the final tracks. They are old, half filled with drifts, their edges softened by time and trembling wind. But they are unmistakably mammoth-wide as two human shoulders sunk deep into frost-hard earth. Each one a declaration, a final yes in a world that has forgotten how to answer. You don't know why you're following this trail. There's no herd, no calf, no matriarch, just these prints leading into a narrow pass where even sound struggles to echo. Maybe you're hoping for something you can't name. Maybe you're looking for the last blink. You walk slowly, not out of fatigue though. Yes, you're exhausted, but out of respect. This doesn't feel like a chase, it feels like a procession. A single mammoth separated from the herd. The tracks suggest a limp left side rear foot, but the gait remains steady, composed, like someone who knows the path even if it hurts to take it. The snow deepens. The sky falls lower grayer. The walls of the pass rise up and then the trail stops. At first you think it's lost. Then you realize it's ended. There at the base of a wind-blasted cliff is a shallow depression. Not a den, not a fall. Just a place where the snow has settled into the shape of something large. Something that once breathed. You walk to it, slowly scanning the ridges. There's no carcass, no bones, no fur. Just a patch of snow perfectly smooth. Except for one indentation, a brow, pressed into the surface like a final exhale. A shallow, perfect arch. The last mammoth didn't collapse, it lowered its head, gently, deliberately, as if saying, "This is where I stop. This is where I shield myself one last time." You kneel beside the indentation. Brush snow from its edges. Run your fingers along the hollow where the fur must have curled. And you blink slowly, not out of sadness, out of awe. Odd fact. Ice cores from the Yana River Delta contain tiny traces of mammoth fur proteins, evidence not just of presence, but of movement. The last mammoths didn't disappear all at once. They faded step by step, blink by blink. You sit there next to that silent impression in the snow and tilt your head. The wind softens. The world doesn't end, it just quietly forgets for a while. You close your eyes and imagine it, the final mammoth standing beneath a gray sky, her brows heavy with melt. Her eyes watching not for danger but for memory. And then she lowers her head not in defeat but in rest, and blinks once. Then stillness, not silence, just stillness. You whisper, "Thank you," not because she heard, but because you did. You rise, step carefully around the print, and begin the walk back. You don't look behind you. There's nothing to see. Only a place that once held the weight of 1,000 winters. And one final brow. And it was enough. The mammoth's eyebrow, once dismissed as a forgotten feature of Ice Age biology, reveals itself here as a miracle of survival, meaning, and memory. Across 15,000 words, you followed not just the creatures themselves, but the shadows they left behind, those thick, weather-beating arches of fur that allowed them to read the windshield their eyes from snow glare and communicate something far deeper than instinct. You watched a calf stumble without them, blinded by a spring's accident and rescued by a humble strip of hide. You saw young hunters imitate them with soot and ritual, believing that by painting their brows they could summon ancestral favor. You listened to elders argue, slept beside a frozen brow that held an expression, and winced as a future scientist misread history in real time. Through it all, the eyebrow wasn't just an adaptation, it was a language, a compass, a curtain pulled back to reveal the way forward. And in the end, the final mammoth didn't vanish in panic or violence. She lowered her head slowly in a silent act of rest. Her brow pressed into the snow like punctuation at the end of an epic, soft, strong unblinking. You leave not with answers but with understanding. That sometimes the most overlooked parts of a story are the ones that carried its weight all along. And if you listen carefully, really listen, you might still hear them blink.